The plan was flawless, until it wasn't. In the silent heart of a Midwestern night in early 2003, three figures dressed in black stood over open duffel bags inside the dimly lit vault of River City First Bank. Bundles of cash, $1.2 million in total, lay within their grasp. The mastermind of the crew, Danny Hayes, allowed himself a rare triumphant grin as he scooped up the last stack of bills. Months of careful plotting had led to this moment, and it looked like they had pulled it off. But as the heavy vault door creaked on its hinges and the men prepared to slip away into darkness, a faint whoop-whoop of sirens rose in the distance. Danny's blood turned to ice. Red and blue lights flickered through the high windows, dancing across the walls of the bank. In an instant, triumph gave way to panic. They were caught in the act. Minutes earlier, the streets of River City had been quiet. Outside the bank's rear delivery entrance, their lookout and getaway driver, Trevor, had been waiting in a nondescript van with the engine off and lights dimmed. Everything had been running smoothly. Too smoothly. Trevor was hunched over a police scanner, listening intently to the crackle of radio chatter. For nearly an hour, there'd been nothing notable, just routine calls. Then suddenly, a stern voice cut through the static. All units, silent alarm triggered at River City First Bank on 4th and Elm. Possible burglary in progress. Proceed with caution. Trevor's heart skipped a beat. Silent alarm? How? They had neutralized the security. Or so they thought. Trevor grabbed his two-way radio, voice shaking as he warned his crew inside. "Guys, we've got a big problem. Cops are on the way. They know." Inside the vault, Danny's eyes went wide. This wasn't part of the plan at all. 3 months before that fateful night, Danny Hayes sat in a cramped booth at a roadside diner just outside River City. A neon, open 24 hours sign buzzed in the window as trucks rumbled by on the highway. There, over stale coffee and greasy fries, Danny quietly laid out a daring proposal to two old acquaintances. He spoke in a low, controlled tone, the tone of a man accustomed to getting others to trust him. He had identified a target, a small but prosperous bank branch known to handle large cash deposits from local businesses. This branch, River City First Bank, was tucked in a quiet downtown corner and rumored to be holding unusual amounts of cash in its vault over the coming holiday weekend. Danny was no ordinary thief. In his late 30s, he was a former security consultant, a man who once made a living testing banks' alarm systems and vault defenses for weaknesses. He knew how the unbeatable systems worked, and more importantly, how to beat them. But a layoff and a grudge against the banking industry had left him disillusioned and desperate. If anyone could mastermind a perfect heist, it was him. His deep-set blue eyes and calm demeanor belied the intensity of his resolve. As he spoke, his companions listened with a mix of excitement and nerves. They all understood the stakes. Danny's crew would be small and specialized. Each member had a role, a talent honed by experience. Alex Ortiz, the tech specialist, wiry, sharp-witted, and a wizard with alarm systems and electronics. Alex had spent years installing security systems for businesses and learning their vulnerabilities. His job? Disable the bank's alarms and cameras at just the right moments and ensure no silent alerts got out. Marcus Knox Campbell, the safecracker, a stocky, methodical man with salt and pepper hair. Knox had once been a professional locksmith. He had a surgeon's touch with locks and vaults. His task? Breach the vault quietly and efficiently, whether by combination or by drill, before any response could be triggered. Trevor Gunn, the getaway driver and lookout, tall, lean, and cool under pressure. Trevor was an ex-UPS delivery driver who knew the city's streets and backroads by heart. His role? Navigate the escape route and act as eyes and ears on the outside via police scanner. Danny himself would coordinate every step and adapt the plan on the fly if needed. He'd also go inside the bank with Alex and Knox to oversee the operation and handle any surprises. Over that late-night diner meeting, Danny outlined the blueprint of the heist. He tapped a city map spread on the table, pointing to the bank's location. "Here's where we hit," he said, tracing the narrow alley behind the bank. The bank shared walls with a closed furniture store on one side and an accounting office on the other. It had a single large vault inside, located at the back of the building. The vault, Danny explained, was an older model but solid, likely a Diebold steel-reinforced vault with a heavy door and a time lock set to prevent after-hours opening. However, Danny had learned through a former colleague that this branch's vault time lock was often left set to allow nightly access for armored truck pickups when needed, due to the high cash volume. That was a potential weak point. If they timed it on a night when the time lock window was open for a scheduled pickup, Knox might crack it right then and there with the code or minimal drilling. Daniel's insider knowledge didn't stop at the vault. Through careful social engineering over weeks, he had managed to glean details about the bank's alarm system. Posing as a city inspector, he chatted up a maintenance worker and confirmed the alarm model, an older unit connected via phone line to a private security company. It had motion detectors inside, contacts on the doors, and a silent alarm on the vault door itself. The silent alarm especially concerned him. If that vault was tampered with, it would send a quiet distress call, but Alex was confident he could disable the alarms. He planned to infiltrate the alarm system by accessing the junction box on the building's exterior and temporarily cut the phone line just as they went in. They would also intercept the alarm signals and loop the CCTV cameras. In theory, it would appear to any security monitoring service that all was normal at the bank that night. Cameras showing empty halls, alarms reporting all clear, while they were inside. Danny also insisted on a diversion. To buy extra time, they would create a false emergency across town. Trevor knew a guy who could torch an abandoned car in an industrial lot at precisely 2 a.m., just a few minutes before they'd crack the vault. A fire and explosion in a remote part of the city would draw police and firefighters away, occupying the first responders at the crucial moment. With luck, any alarm notification, if one somehow slipped through, would be low priority with units already busy. It was an added insurance policy, one Danny felt was worth the extra $5,000 he'd have to pay the contact for the stunt. Everything was about stacking the odds in their favor. The crew peppered Danny with questions and what-ifs. What if an officer happened by the bank during the heist? Unlikely. Danny had observed the police patrol patterns. That beat rarely passed the bank between 1 and 3 a.m. on weekends. What if an alarm had a cellular backup? Alex had done his homework. The bank's system was older and primarily landline-based, but they'd still use a radio jammer briefly just in case when entering. What if one of them got caught? Danny's rule: no names, no personal traces. They'd wear gloves, masks, and use untraceable two-way radios. If anyone got caught, the others were to stick to the plan and escape. No heroics. By the time dawn's light crept into the diner, the plan was set. It was daring, yes, but meticulously crafted. Danny looked around the table at his accomplices, each one motivated by money and a certain thrill just like him. They all nodded in agreement. They were in. Over the next weeks, they refined details, gathered equipment, and watched the bank like hawks. Danny had them rehearse scenarios in an empty warehouse, from the moment of entry to cracking a practice safe. Every movement was choreographed. Who would carry the cash, how long each step should take, what code phrases to use on the radios. Nothing was left to chance, or so they believed. A crisp autumn chill hung in the air on the night of the heist. By 1:30 a.m., downtown River City was deserted, the usual bustle of day replaced by silence. The bank sat dark at the corner of 4th and Elm, a modest 2-story brick building with an old-style facade. A single streetlight cast long shadows across the front steps. Danny and his crew were poised to begin. They had waited for the witching hour, when even the late-night bar crowd had gone home and the city dozed. A massive vault door like this stood between Danny's crew and $1.2 million in cash that night. Dressed in black from head to toe, Faces concealed by dark balaclavas, Danny, Alex, and Knox crept through the alley to the bank's rear entrance. Trevor remained in the parked van a block away, engine idling low and radio equipment at the ready. Alex swiftly got to work at the alarm junction box affixed to the brick wall. With gloved hands, he pried it open and connected a small bypass device he'd built. His fingers worked deftly with wires and a portable keypad, temporarily fooling the alarm into thinking it was in maintenance mode. At the same time, he clipped the phone line that connected the bank to outside monitoring, but rigged it so it wouldn't trigger an alert about the line cut. Within seconds, a green LED on his device blinked twice. The alarm signals were now under his control. Alarms looped, were green-lit, Alex whispered. Danny tried the back door. It was locked, of course, but that's why Knox was there. The burly safecracker pulled out a set of fine lockpicks and went to work on the simple tumbler lock. In less than 30 seconds, there was a soft click. Knox eased the door open, and the three men slipped silently inside, shutting it behind them.
They found themselves in a dark staff hallway at the rear of the bank. The faint smell of paper and ink hung in the air. Alex immediately jammed a crowbar under the door and a heavy wedge to ensure no one could burst in from outside unexpectedly. Then he moved to a small keypad on the wall, the building's interior motion sensor alarm. He entered the code provided by Danny's insider contact, and a tiny red light switched off. So far, so good. Moving in practiced formation, the team navigated by flashlight beams shaded with red gels to reduce visibility from outside. They passed the manager's office and teller stations, heading straight for the vault room. The vault lay behind a thick metal door in the center of the building. Danny's pulse quickened as they approached it. This was the make or break moment. The vault door gleamed in their flashlight beams. A formidable round door with a combination dial and dual keyholes. It looked antique, likely installed decades ago, yet still intimidating. Knox knelt by the vault, unpacking his safe-cracking tools, a cordless heavy-duty drill, specialized drill bits for hardened steel, a mechanic's stethoscope, and a small electronic oscilloscope to detect the faint clicks of the combination lock's internal wheels. They had anticipated possibly needing to drill through to manipulate the locking mechanism if the combination was unknown. But Danny had a stroke of luck in his planning. Through a bribe and bluff, he had obtained a copy of one vault key from a retiring bank employee's stash. Each vault lock required 2 keys used simultaneously. He had one, and had crafted a replica of the second from a mold taken off the manager's key during a staged encounter. Moreover, an inside source had hinted at the vault combination, at least most of it. Something like 24-7. The last 2 digits were uncertain, but Knox was confident he could brute force those if needed, using his electronic device to listen for the telltale click when the final number fell into place. Working with steady hands, Knox inserted the 2 vault keys. Danny and Alex shared a tense glance as Knox began turning the large combination dial, ever so slowly, while listening through the stethoscope pressed against the cold metal. 24-7, Knox whispered as he dialed in the known part of the code. Then, inch by inch, he rotated through the remaining possibilities for the last number. 32, click. 33, click. 34. On 35, he paused, a grin spreading under his mask. Got it, he breathed. He had felt the faint resistance give. The combination was set. All 3 held their breath as Knox and Danny simultaneously turned the 2 key locks in unison and tried the lever. With a heavy clunk, the massive bolts retracted. The vault door began to swing open. They were in. Inside the vault, the beam of Danny's flashlight danced across stacks of currency bundles neatly piled on shelves, as well as rows of safe deposit boxes on the walls. It was more money than any of them had seen in one place.
brick after brick of cash, much of it in hundreds and fifties bundled and labeled. Danny's intel was right. The bank had an unusually large cache this weekend. Jackpot. He allowed himself a tight smile of relief as he moved quickly to the cash stacks. Alex and Danny opened their duffel bags and started stuffing them full. Knox stayed by the door, keeping an eye on the corridor and periodically checking his watch. They had agreed on a 10-minute window inside the vault, maximum. Every minute longer increased the risk. The plan had been precise. Entry at 2:10 a.m., vault open by 2:20, out by 2:30. By then, the diversion across town, the burning car, would have drawn attention, hopefully ensuring no units free to respond here even if something slipped. So far, they were on schedule. Cash bundles thudded into the bags. $1,200,000 is a lot of paper. Roughly 120 packets of $10,000 each in mixed denominations. 2 duffels could barely fit it, but they crammed the larger denominations first. Danny's hands were steady as he worked, but his mind raced with excitement. This money meant escape, a new life far from here. For Knox, it meant a comfortable retirement. For Alex, it settled old debts. Each was lost in thoughts of what the cash would bring, but they forced themselves to focus. They were just about done, 9 minutes in, when a tiny detail went awry. A detail none of them had anticipated. As Knox stood guard, he noticed something strange. A green LED on the alarm panel in the hallway had switched to red, blinking rapidly. Alex?" he called in a harsh whisper. "Did you see that?" Alex stepped out of the vault room, eyes narrowing at the panel on the wall. That blinking red light was not part of the plan. It indicated the alarm panel had detected a fault, perhaps the phone line cut or a tampering signal. It shouldn't have. Alex had bypassed it. Unless... Suddenly, Trevor's urgent voice crackled over their radio earpieces. "Guys, we got a situation. Dispatch knows something's up. Silent alarm triggered at the bank. They're sending units right now." His tone was hushed but intense. For a split second, Danny felt the floor tilt under him. How could that be? They'd been so careful.
But there was no time to debate. Immediately, years of experience kicked in. "Pack it up, now," Danny hissed. Inside the vault, Danny and Alex zipped the bulging duffel bags of cash. They left some money behind in their rush. A few bundles spilled on the floor, but no time to grab them. Knox gently pushed the vault door until it was almost closed again. No need to advertise to responding cops that the money was gone, if they could help it. The men sprinted down the hall toward their exit, hauling the heavy bags. Outside, the distant wail of sirens grew louder by the second. Trevor, peering from the van, could make out the flash of lights reflecting off buildings down the street. The police were close, maybe a minute out. He had to move or risk being boxed in. Over the radio, he whispered, "I'll circle around to the secondary pickup point. Get out the back now." Then Trevor reluctantly put the van in gear and drove off to avoid direct confrontation with the arriving officers, planning to swing back later if he could. Danny, Alex, and Knox barreled out the same rear door they'd entered. The cool night air hit their faces as they paused in the alley, adjusting to the darkness outside. That pause saved their lives. Because at that exact moment, the first police cruiser screeched around the corner, headlights off, rolling slow and quiet up to the front of the bank. The officers hadn't seen the robbers yet, but they were approaching tactically. Danny motioned frantically to his crew and ducked behind a dumpster in the alley. The others followed, crouching low in the shadows. They all heard it, the crunch of police boots on gravel, and a flashlight beam slicing through the darkness at the mouth of the alley. The police were checking the perimeter. Adrenaline pounded in Danny's ears. This was the nightmare scenario, to be cornered. But the mastermind in him refused to freeze. Through hand signals and urgent whispers, he enacted Plan B.
In their planning, Danny had grimly prepared for this possibility. If cornered, split up and escape on foot through pre-scouted routes and regroup later. Each of them had a different route memorized. Danny would take the alley westward toward a railroad yard. Alex would slip south through backyards. Knox would head north toward the riverfront. Trevor, if possible, would find whoever he could with the van. But everyone was prepared to go solo if necessary. They quickly divided the loot, 2 bundles of cash to Knox, 2 to Alex, just in case someone got caught. No one person held everything. Danny kept the 2 heaviest duffels with the majority. After all, he was the fastest runner of the group. It was a calculated risk. They nodded at each other. A silent pact to regroup if they survived the night. Then, as a police flashlight beam started probing deeper down the alley, Danny tossed a glass bottle he found on the ground toward the far end of the passage. It shattered loudly against the brick wall. "Over there!" a cop shouted, and the beam swung toward the noise. In that split second, Danny whispered, "Go!" Knox and Alex darted in opposite directions. Knox slipped into the dark gap between the bank and the next building, disappearing into a maze of sheds and fences beyond. Alex vaulted over a low chain-link fence behind the dumpster, heading south through a narrow backyard, clinging to shadows. The officers, momentarily confused by the bottle noise, didn't spot either man clearly, just rustling movement in the dark. "This is the police!" one officer yelled. "Come out with your hands up!" Danny remained crouched behind the dumpster with the 2 duffel bags. He knew running with both sacks would slow him to a crawl and make noise. He had to be clever. Quickly, he zipped the bags together into one bundle using carabiner clips, a trick he'd prepared for, then hoisted the load up to the dumpster's rim and gently lowered it inside among the trash bags. The dumpster, half filled with yesterday's garbage, would serve as a temporary hiding spot for the money. If he was caught, at least they might not find the cash on him. And if he escaped, he could come back for it. It pained him to part with the money, but survival came first. As he finished stashing the loot, another flashlight beam swung near, illuminating the edge of Danny's shoulder. "There! Behind the dumpster!" a voice cried. Danny's heart jolted. He bolted, sprinting down the alley westward, away from the bank, even as the shout of "Stop! Police!" rang out behind him. A gunshot cracked the night. One officer fired a warning shot into the air, or perhaps a misaimed shot at him. Danny felt a surge of terror and forced himself to run faster, zigzagging once instinctively. He did not return fire. He carried a handgun, but he knew exchanging bullets would only worsen things, and he had vowed not to hurt anyone unless absolutely forced. He dashed around a corner, feet pounding the pavement. Behind him, the officers were in pursuit now, radioing in, "Suspect on foot, heading west on Elm. Black clothing, carrying... Actually, no bag visible." They didn't realize he'd ditched the loot. That confusion might buy him a few seconds. Danny's lungs burned as he sprinted through an empty parking lot. He spotted exactly what he was counting on. A chain-link fence at the lot's end, and beyond it, the railroad yard. Earlier that month, during reconnaissance, Danny noticed the yard provided cover. Rows of idle freight cars and containers. It was the perfect place to lose pursuers. Under the pale moon, he scaled the 6-foot fence in a heartbeat and dropped down on the other side, landing on gravel. He could hear the officers shouting, their heavy footfalls behind. They were coming, but a bit slower over the fence. He had a chance. The rail yard was dark and strewn with hulking shapes of rail cars. Danny weaved between 2 freight carriages, crouching low. The smell of creosote and steel filled the air. A lone yard light cast weak illumination in patches, but plenty of inky shadows remained. Up ahead, A locomotive engine idled quietly, a low hum in the otherwise still yard. If he could make it past that engine and across the yard, there was a storm drain tunnel that led under the tracks toward a river. Another thing he had noted as a possible escape path. It was risky, but right now risk was all he had. He could hear the police scaling the fence behind him. A flashlight beam flickered across the side of a freight car near him. He pressed his back flat against the cold metal of the rail car, willing himself to be invisible, like a shadow. Footsteps crunched on gravel as one officer landed in the yard and started moving between the tracks. "Spread out," one called to another. "He's in here somewhere." Danny crept along the side of the car, keeping it between him and the nearest flashlight. He was grateful for the black clothing that made him hard to spot. Step by step, breath held, he edged toward the idling locomotive engine, which sat about 30 yards ahead. If he timed it right, he could use the noise of the engine to mask his movements. But fate had another turn in store, a slight one. As he moved, his foot accidentally nudged a loose piece of metal on the ground. It clattered against the rail with a ping. "Over there!" A flashlight beam swung straight toward the noise, catching a glimpse of a moving shadow. Danny. "Stop!" came the shout again, and this time 2 silhouettes of officers were visible not far behind. They started running toward him, beams bobbing. Danny cursed under his breath. He broke cover and sprinted outright toward the locomotive. The chase was fully on now. He rounded the locomotive's front, hearing the officers closing in. In desperation, Danny noticed the open cap of the train engine. A maintenance crew must have left it unlocked. With a burst of effort, he climbed the metal rungs on the side of the engine and hauled himself into the cab. It was lit only by a few dim gauges, but it provided a vantage point. From the small window, he saw 2 police officers just about 20 feet away, scanning the area. Danny's mind raced. He spotted a greasy work jacket and cap hanging on a hook inside the cab, likely a spare left by a rail worker. An idea sparked. Throwing off his black ski mask and tossing his distinctive black hoodie, he donned the grimy brown jacket and cap. He smeared some engine grease on his face for good measure. In seconds, Danny transformed his appearance from a masked thief in black to what looked like a rail yard worker taking a break. He made a split-second decision. Instead of continuing to flee visibly, he would bluff. He popped out of the locomotive cab on the opposite side from the approaching officers, making a bit of noise as if he'd just noticed them. "Hey, what's going on?" he shouted in a gruff, annoyed voice, waving one hand. The officers, startled, turned their lights to him. They saw what appeared to be a lanky rail worker, cap pulled low, emerging from the train. From their angle and in the poor light, Danny's earlier all-black attire was now mostly hidden under the oversized brown jacket, and his face looked smeared with dirt. Crucially, he was empty-handed. No money, no bag. "You there," one officer barked. "Did you see someone run through here just now? A man in black?" Danny put on his best bewildered expression. "In black? No, sir. I just got back from checking the engine here," he drawled, trying to sound a bit agitated. "Is something wrong? I heard a commotion and saw you fellas running." He pointed vaguely back toward the bank area. The second officer jogged closer. Shining the light briefly in Danny's face, he squinted, raising a hand like someone not used to bright lights. The officer saw only a grease-streaked face under the cap. He didn't look like the man they chased moments ago. "We're looking for an intruder, possibly armed," the officer said briskly. "You really didn't see anyone pass by?" Danny shook his head. "Nobody but you,"
he lied smoothly. "I heard a noise that way, though," he added, gesturing toward the far end of the yard beyond the locomotive. "Like someone jumping over metal scraps?" "Might have been that way. I was about to radio it in." The two cops exchanged glances. In the distance, more sirens echoed. Backup was likely arriving, and other officers might have picked up Knox or Alex's trail. These two had to make a call now on which way to go. "Stay here," one ordered Danny, still eyeing him. "And be careful. Lock that train up and wait until we secure the area." "Yes, sir," Danny replied obediently. Without further delay, the officers continued past the locomotive, rushing toward the far end of the yard as Danny had suggested. He watched as their flashlight beams faded into the darkness. The moment they were far enough, Danny exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The bluff had worked, incredibly. He climbed down from the locomotive as calmly as possible, fighting the urge to sprint until he was out of their sight. Then, keeping low, he moved eastward, skirting the yard in the opposite direction from the police. He shed the work jacket and cap once he was sure he was alone, stuffing them under a dumpster by a warehouse. No need to carry evidence. Now he looked once again like just another guy, albeit a bit dirty and disheveled, walking on a late night. He blended into the shadows of a back street and circled back cautiously toward the bank area, sticking to alleys. By now, the scene at 4th and Elm was chaos. Multiple police cruisers had arrived, lights flashing everywhere. Officers had taped off the bank. A small crowd of onlookers in pajamas and robes gathered at a distance, awoken by the commotion. Danny watched from half a block away, hidden behind a parked truck in an alley. He saw two of his crew members in custody. Alex was on his knees in handcuffs near a patrol car. It looked like he'd been caught trying to run through backyards. Knox was nowhere in sight here. With luck, maybe Knox got farther away or was hiding out like Danny. Danny's heart sank seeing Alex caught, but he knew there was nothing he could do for him now. Alex would keep his mouth shut. Danny trusted that. They all knew the code. Say nothing. Let the lawyers work it later. What about Trevor, the driver? The van was gone. Hopefully, Trevor got out clean when things went bad. The police seemed unaware of a getaway vehicle, as their focus was on the bank and perimeter. Danny suspected Trevor would lay low and ditch the van just to be safe. Then Danny's eyes fixed on the dumpster, where he had stashed the money. It was still sitting in the alley behind the bank. No one had checked it yet. The police attention was all on securing the bank building itself and chasing suspects on foot. The dumpster was outside their cordon for now. Danny's mind raced. Could he possibly retrieve the cash under their noses? It seemed impossible at the moment with all the police around. But perhaps later. He knew he couldn't stay here too long. Already a helicopter's distant thrum signaled that state police or news choppers might be arriving to sweep the area with spotlights. He had to move. He silently slipped away down the alley, leaving the chaotic scene behind. With adrenaline still coursing through his veins, Danny navigated through the sleeping city on foot, careful to avoid well-lit streets. His destination was a safe house of sorts, an abandoned garage on the edge of town that he and Trevor had prearranged as a fallback meetup point. It was about 2 miles away, a tough distance after an exhausting chase, but Danny jogged and walked in intervals, determined to put distance between himself and the manhunt downtown. He kept off main roads, cutting through back lanes and even wading a shallow creek at one point to mask his trail in case canine units were searching. Indeed, he heard distant barking, suggesting police dogs were out. By the time he approached the old garage, the eastern sky was faintly hinting at dawn.
The garage was an old auto repair shop, long out of business. One of those forgotten places slated for demolition, but still standing. They had chosen it because it was secluded behind a chain-link fence and overgrown weeds, and it conveniently had an old pickup truck in semi-working condition that Trevor had stashed there a week prior. That truck was their contingency plan for escape if the primary van was compromised. Inside the garage, in the gloom, Danny heard a hushed voice. "Danny? That you?" It was Trevor. He stepped out from behind the pickup, relief evident on his face. The two men clasped hands briefly, a quiet celebration that both were alive and free, at least for now. Trevor had parked the van elsewhere and doubled back here as planned. Knox was also there, nursing a bruised shoulder, but otherwise okay. He had taken a tumble down an embankment, evading a cop, but managed to slip away in the dark and loop around to the garage. A quick round of tense hugs and pats. They were hugely relieved to see each other, but the relief was tempered by the absence of Alex. They all knew Alex had been caught. In terse whispers, they exchanged what intel they had. Knox had seen Alex get nabbed in a backyard. He himself had hid under a dock by the river until the search moved on, then ran here. Trevor reported hearing on the scanner that police were still hunting a third suspect, which was Danny, though they hadn't caught him or Knox. The city was waking up to news of an attempted bank robbery. It wouldn't be safe to linger. "The money?" Trevor asked quietly. Danny took a deep breath. This was the hard part. "Stashed in the dumpster behind the bank," he said, grimy and exhausted. Knox's eyes widened, and Trevor cursed under his breath. It was a bitter pill. All that work and risk, and the cash was sitting back in enemy territory. But Danny held up a hand. "They didn't find it. Not yet. They were swarming the bank itself when I left. If they don't search that dumpster carefully, it might still be there come nightfall. Or it could get hauled off by the garbage truck Monday. Either way, we couldn't grab it then." A heavy silence fell. The money was effectively lost for now. Knox clenched his jaw, but he nodded in understanding. None of them blamed Danny. If he hadn't hid it, he'd likely have been caught with it. They still had a slim chance to recover it later if they played smart. And recovering it was a thought on all their minds. $1.2 million was worth a return trip, but only if it could be done safely. Perhaps once the heat died down, one of them in a disguise could scout the alley. However, right now the priority was escape. They needed to get out of the city before roadblocks or APBs, all points bulletins, locked it down fully. The old pickup truck in the garage was their ride. Trevor had worked on it earlier to ensure it could run. It wasn't pretty, a rusted 1980s Ford, but it started with a roar after a couple of tries. The sun was just peeking over the horizon as they rolled out of the garage, through a gap in the fence, and onto a back road. Trevor drove, keeping to less traveled side streets heading west, away from downtown. Danny slumped in the passenger seat, catching his breath, and Knox lay low in the back cab out of sight. They all changed out of their black clothing, swapping into some old coveralls and jackets that had been left in the truck to appear more like handymen or laborers. As they approached the city limits, they passed a police car going the opposite direction. For a heart-stopping moment, they worried it would stop them. 3 rough-looking guys in an old pickup at dawn might raise eyebrows. But the cruiser blew past, sirens off, likely heading toward the bank scene. It seemed word hadn't spread about this specific vehicle. With every mile, their hope grew. By mid-morning, they were long gone from River City, driving on a rural highway. Exhaustion set in, but they knew it was far from over. Alex was in custody, he would be charged, and he would likely lawyer up. They had faith he wouldn't talk, but evidence might tie him in. Did he have anything on him? They doubted it. They were all careful to carry no IDs during the job. Still, Danny's mind raced over the possible loose ends. The van was a loose end. Trevor had ditched it in a lake. The radios? They were disposable and left behind. The tools? Some were left at the scene in the scramble. Not ideal, but nothing that traced to them personally. Masks, clothes. Danny himself left his hoodie and mask at the rail yard. Maybe police dogs found them. But they'd only show generic store origins. As far as identities, Danny and Knox were still in the clear for now. They'd need to lay very low, possibly assume new aliases entirely. Trevor finally pulled off down a dirt road by a thick forest. They agreed to part ways for the time being and dispose of the truck here. They doused it with bleach wipes to remove prints and left it hidden under brush. Knox planned to head toward a friend's place out of state and maybe eventually get to Canada. Trevor would make his way south with some cash Danny had stashed at the safe house earlier, a separate emergency fund, and lie low. Danny, he had one unfinished piece of business that he couldn't quite let go of, the $1.2 million. It gnawed at him that it was so close, yet so far.
Over the next 2 days, as the dust settled, news reports blared about the foiled $1.2 million bank heist. The media had a field day, dubbing it the River City Heist, astonished that such an attempt happened in their quiet town. Alex was paraded as the sole captured suspect, charged with armed robbery and facing serious prison time. Police claimed to be on the hunt for at least 2 others who escaped the scene. They also triumphantly announced recovery of the stolen money, and Danny's heart dropped when he heard that. But when the details emerged, it turned out the police thought the robbers hadn't gotten any money at all, because inside the vault, there were still bundles of cash left, the ones they hadn't packed, and they assumed the attempt was interrupted before money was taken. The press release made no mention of finding money elsewhere, which meant the duffels in the dumpster had not been found. Perhaps in the chaos, the trash bin was overlooked, or maybe an officer looked but didn't dig under the garbage bags. In any case, Danny had a sliver of hope. On the 3rd night after the heist, Danny returned to River City under cover of darkness. It was an enormous risk. He was likely a wanted man with an APB out, though only Alex's identity was known for sure. But Danny was careful. He altered his appearance, shaving his hair down to a buzz cut, wearing glasses, and donning a baggy workman's uniform and a fake mustache. He looked nothing like the scruffy mastermind who fled the other night. At 3 a.m., he drove a different car, a beat-up sedan bought for cash from a junk sale, quietly to the alley behind the bank. The bank itself was still damaged from where investigators had dusted for prints and gone through everything, but at this hour, it was dark and empty. The alley, stood the dumpster. Danny's throat tightened. This was it. He parked around the corner and slipped into the alley on foot. With a deep breath, he peered into the dumpster with a flashlight filtered blue. Beneath a pile of stinking trash bags and boxes was what he prayed to find. 2 black duffel bags, still clipped together. He almost laughed with relief. The garbage hadn't been picked up yet. Maybe the schedule was delayed due to police activity or simply because the regular collection was Monday morning, a few hours from now. In any case, he fished out the bags and quickly looked inside. Bundles of cash, slightly smelly and stained with coffee grounds, but very much intact. His $1.2 million haul was safe. Danny didn't linger. He hefted the bags, much heavier now than when adrenaline first carried them, and hurried to his car. Within minutes, he was back on the road, heart pounding not from fear this time, but from exhilaration. He had done it.
Against all odds, against sirens, police, chases, and chaos, he had pulled off the heist and escaped. Not in the clean, perfectly executed way he had envisioned, and not without sacrifices. Alex's arrest weighed heavily on him. But the end result was undeniable. Danny Hayes was a free man with a fortune in stolen cash at his side. In the days that followed, the authorities remained baffled. The investigation struggled to piece together the full story. Alex Ortiz refused to give up any information, claiming he was forced by unknown accomplices. Fingerprints lifted from the vault tools and the scene matched no known criminal records. Danny had recruited people with clean slates, or at least no prior convictions in databases. The duffel bags and money were, of course, gone, quietly snatched from under their noses. But the police didn't even know to look for them after the fact. They simply assumed the robbers failed to get the loot. Publicly, the chief of police assured everyone that they were closing in on the remaining suspects. Privately, it was a sore point that two robbers melted away into the night. News outlets and locals traded theories about the mysterious mastermind who had evaded capture. Some dubbed him the Phantom Planner for his ability to disappear, though Danny chuckled at that nickname. If only they knew how close he came to failing. Others speculated it was an inside job, or that the suspects were already long gone out of state. For Danny, laying low became the top priority. He used part of the cash to quietly secure a false identity through some underworld contacts. A process that took some time, but with a fraction of $1.2 million, you can open many doors. Under a new name, he drifted to the West Coast, far from the Midwest town where everyone was looking for him. He adopted a quiet life, keeping his head down. But sometimes, late at night, when he was alone, he would recall each step of that heist, every close call, every thrill. It was like replaying a movie in his mind, suspenseful, cinematic, unforgettable.
And what of the money? Danny was smart with it. He didn't start spending lavishly. That was a surefire way to draw attention. Instead, he stashed most of it while slowly laundering small amounts into legitimate funds. A lesson he'd learned from his security work. Sudden wealth triggers alarms. In a way, the money mattered less to him than the fact that he beat the system that night. Occasionally, he got word through coded messages that Knox and Trevor were safe in their new lives, each with a cut of the cash Danny recovered. As for Alex, Danny made sure a high-powered lawyer was anonymously paid to handle Alex's case. The evidence against Alex was solid for the break-in, but without tying him to the others or to any actual theft, since officially nothing was stolen, a peculiar quirk of the case. His sentence eventually was not as harsh as it could have been. Danny never forgot the sacrifice Alex made by getting caught. Years later, the tale of the River City heist turned into a local legend, a story told with a mix of awe and disbelief, how a small crew attempted a brazen robbery, how they were caught in the act, yet how the mastermind slipped through the fingers of law enforcement in a desperate escape. It's a story of audacity, ingenuity, and split-second decisions under pressure. Many details never made it to the public. The fake rail worker bluff, the diversion fire, the dumpster cash stash, those remained Danny's secret chapters. But whenever he hears sirens in the distance, or the rumble of a freight train at night, Danny Hayes is reminded of that climactic moment, the crossroads of fate, where everything hung in the balance. He'll always remember, standing in that vault, the weight of $1 million in his hands, and hearing those sirens. In that moment, he realized a truth that would stay with him. No plan is ever truly perfect. But the will to adapt and survive can snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. It was a hard lesson learned under the most cinematic of circumstances. And
As he lives out his quiet days under a new sky, Danny often wonders, and perhaps the audience does too, was it luck, skill, or a bit of both that let him get away? One thing is certain. On that night in 2003, a mastermind faced impossible odds and managed a desperate escape that people would talk about for years. And somewhere out there, he's living testament that sometimes the boldest stories, the ones that keep us hooked every minute, are the ones that really do happen just beyond the spotlight of everyday life. Subscribe to this channel for more intriguing stories like this. Or you tell us what interests you, and we delve deep into researching one for you. Thanks for watching.